My name is Victor Furman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. Is there a dreammaker who visits us each night with gifts of wisdom? How may dreamwork assist us on the path of healing and growth? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Lisa Marchiano, says dreamwork assists us on the path of becoming whole, what Carl Jung referred to as individuation. Lisa and her Jungian Analyst colleagues, Deborah, Stewart, and Joseph Lee, host the popular podcast This Jungian Life. Her website is lisamarchiano.com, and she joins me this week to share her path and book, co-authored with Stewart and Lee, Dreamwise, Unlocking the Meaning of Your Dreams. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited, Lisa Marchiano. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Lisa, please share with us your path and how you chose Jungian analysis as your practice.
Well, I don't know that I chose it. I think it chose me. I think a lot of people that come to Jung's work do feel a deep draw to it, and maybe even what we might call a calling. So I was actually in graduate school studying international relations, but I was 28 years old. I was at that time of life that, astrology refers to it as a Saturn return, and psychologists call it the age 30 transition, where I think a lot of things were coming into focus for me, and I went through a difficult passage. A relationship failed. I wasn't really sure about my path. And at that time, I came across a book that, it sort of followed me from place to place. I kept on not buying it because I thought, I'm in graduate school. I have 400 pages of reading this week. I can't buy a book. But then I kept on coming across it until even I recognized that probably meant I needed to buy it. And so I did, and I brought it home to my apartment and I started reading it, and I realized it was a signed copy by the author, who was a Jungian analyst named Linda Leonard, who has become a kind of mentor and friend. And the book was so remarkable. It was a book about relationships from a Jungian perspective, and it really introduced me to Jung's ideas in this really wonderful way. And it didn't take away my suffering, but it did change my relationship with my suffering. And by the time I was into reading it, not only was I feeling somewhat less acutely distressed, but I also started to think, wow, this is really interesting. Maybe I would like to do that someday. And it took me a number of years to get around to pursuing it, but that was the beginning.
What is the foundation of Jungian analysis, and how does it differ from other forms?
Well, Jung was a colleague and contemporary of Freud. Freud was a little older, but the two men were both prominent, and they did collaborate and work together for a while. And in the beginning, Jung was kind of a follower, I would say, of Freud's new method of psychoanalysis, which, of course, took really seriously what was going on in the unconscious, but also was very interested in what had happened in childhood that might be shaping the present. And of course, Freud had these ideas about the role of sexuality. So the two men collaborated for about 7 years, but Jung's theories started to diverge. He didn't feel that sexuality was the only important motivation, as Freud tended to do. And he also was interested not only in what had happened in the past in a person's life, but where the psyche wanted to go. So a big difference between Jung and Freud is that Freud saw the unconscious as the repository for things that had been forgotten or maybe repressed or maybe just never made it beyond the threshold of consciousness. Well, Jung thought it was all of those things, but he also thought that the unconscious could be generative, that the unconscious was creative, that the unconscious could produce images, emotions, new attitudes, ideas, that would lead us in a new direction that consciousness couldn't even begin to imagine.
Before we discuss Dreamwise, please tell us about your book, The Vital Spark, Reclaim Your Outlaw Energies and Find Your Feminine Fire. What inspired this book, and what message do you offer women?
Well, the book's inspiration actually came from a podcast episode that we recorded. I have a podcast called This Jungian Life, and we did a podcast called Fierce Female Initiations. And while recording that podcast, I realized I just had one fairy tale after another about the process of female initiation. And by the time the podcast was done, I literally thought to myself, well, that's a book. So it just sort of arose in a sense, I think very organically from work I've done on myself, as well as work that I've accompanied women on. And, in a way, it's really all about reclaiming what is sometimes called shadow. Shadow was, of course, Jung's formulation. Now the idea of shadow has really entered the popular culture, but it was originally Jung's idea. And what Jung tells us is that there are aspects of the personality that we leave undeveloped, that maybe we kind of push off to the side, or we kind of exile because we've learned that they're not appreciated or valued in our culture or by our family, let's say. And this is a necessary process. Everyone goes through it. It's not a bad thing to have a shadow. But what is often true is that those aspects of ourselves that we've relegated to shadow can be the source of new energy and enlivenment, especially in midlife. So it's a book about reclaiming qualities that you as a woman may not have let yourself develop. Now, this doesn't apply to all women, but the majority of us tend to be accommodating and agreeable and likable. And so what do we do with those other qualities? So I identify these 7 qualities: disagreeableness, shrewdness, trickster, desire, sexuality, rage, authority, and ruthlessness. And using fairy tales, personal experiences, and client stories and dreams, I explore what happens if we develop a new relationship with some of these qualities. Can we integrate them, and then they become capacities that we have? So we, for example, have the capacity to exercise authority. It doesn't mean we're going to go around doing it all the time, but it means that when it's appropriate, and of course that takes discernment to know when it's appropriate, we can step into that. And then we're stronger, we're fuller, we are more of the person we were meant to be.
An important message in light of recent cultural and political developments.
Yes, I think so.
Absolutely. You had touched upon fairy tale groups, and your bio shares that you facilitate these groups. What are they for, and what may be learned from fairy tales?
Well, I love fairy tales. Fairy tales are part of what really connected me with Jungian work, because Jungians, we really value archetypal material. So myths, fairy tales, religious images, these ancient kind of primal stories that speak to the very essence of what it means to be human. And fairy tales are, of course, universal. They occur in all cultures, and many tales have variants across cultures. So there's sort of like a Cinderella in nearly every culture that we know of. It may be very, very different, but the bones are the same. So fairy tales are beautiful, and they contain this kind of distillation of human wisdom that really comes from the deepest strata, I think, of ourselves. So fairy tales are a big part in most of the books that I've written, The Vital Spark and also my book, Motherhood. I use fairy tales to show these kind of fundamental psychological and relational patterns. And fairy tales are a beautiful way in, but also instructive. They're full of wisdom. So I also have an online fairy tale group for women, and we explore a different tale every month. So some fairy tales really are specifically about a woman's journey. Some more speak to a man's journey. And obviously in this fairy tale group that I run, I pick fairy tales that are focused on a woman's experience, the kinds of things that we might face. And we have a lovely group of women there. And as the month progresses, we discuss the fairy tale, applying it to our own lives. So that's where the magic really happens, is when you can say, where in me has it happened that I've lost contact with my brothers, for example. This month we're looking at the beautiful Grimm's fairy tale of the 6 swans, and the heroine of the tale loses her 6 brothers when they get turned into swans. And what does that mean symbolically or psychologically? And has that ever happened to me in some way? So that's the kind of work that we do in Spinning Straw.
Do you have a favorite fairy tale?
Well, I do. I have one that I have many that I love. It's hard to answer that because I can get so enthusiastic about several of them. But I would say that my favorite fairy tale is the Russian tale of Vasilisa the Beautiful. And somehow whenever I write anything, Vasilisa the Beautiful winds up in it. It's just such a deeply magical, wise, profound tale with some wonderfully colorful imagery, and I have loved it since childhood.
Do all the fairy tales that you folks talk about have happy endings?
Most do. Now, I have included some fairy tales in my books that don't, but for the most part, fairy tales do have happy endings because they are ultimately about the process of individuation, or about the process of growing more whole.
Absolutely. Please tell us about your collaborators in Dreamwise, Deborah, Stewart, and Joseph Lee, and your podcast, The Jungian Life.
So Deb and Joseph and I all went through Jungian training together, which is a wonderfully rich but also arduous experience. We were in training together for the better part of a decade. So we got to know each other really well, and we were united by a sense of common purpose as we struggled through the program together and helped each other get through it. And of course, we were relieved when we graduated and we were each, certified Jungian analysts. But we missed having a project together. And so in 2018, we decided to experiment by starting a podcast. It's called This Jungian Life, and it began in April of 2018, so just a little over 7 years ago. And it's a weekly podcast where we take just any number of themes and explore it through a Jungian lens in just kind of a casual conversation. And then at the end, we always interpret a listener's dream. So anyone can submit their dream to the podcast for possible discussion on the podcast. And we spend about the last 15 to 20 minutes of every episode discussing a dream.
Dreamwise starts with a beautiful quote from Jung. Would you share that with us?
Yes, this is a really beautiful quote. The dream is a little hidden door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the soul, opening into that cosmic night which was psyche long before there was any ego consciousness, and which will remain psyche no matter how far our ego consciousness extends.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I love that idea of the dream as the little hidden door. And so Dreamwise is the book that we wrote together, the three of us, on dream interpretation from a Jungian lens.
And what inspired that book?
Well, we have an online self-paced course called Dream School. And we had created this course back in 2020, and many, several thousand people have been through the course. And it just occurred to me that it would be a wonderful thing to include that material in a book. I'll tell you what really inspired me working on the book is that I love dreams, and I work with dreams every day, my own and other people's. And I feel like there's so much wisdom in them, But dreams are really hard. It's really hard to learn how to work with dreams. And it's especially difficult to learn how to work with your own dreams. So, I wake up from my dreams and I may feel pretty competent working on other people's dreams, but my own dreams, I just feel oftentimes very, very perplexed. So we really wanted with DreamWise to make it as explicit as possible. I sometimes laugh that we're trying to systematize something that really isn't systematizable. But I think we've done a pretty decent job of making dream work kind of as clear and accessible as it can be, so that anyone with the help of DreamWise could begin to work with their dreams symbolically.
And how is it different from other books on dreams?
So there are many wonderful books on dreams. There are, of course, many dream dictionaries, and I'm not a big fan of dream dictionaries. These are the kinds of books that tell you, if you dream about a hose, it means that you're going to trip that day or something. I just made that up. But dream dictionaries tend to have a very kind of concrete understanding of the dream images, and they don't take into account the fact that, a different image might mean something very different to me than it does to you. I have my own personal experience with that thing. I have my associations and my life experience. So no one can tell me what a particular image in one of my dreams means. It's an individual thing. Now, there are some beautiful Jungian books about dream interpretation. There's some classics. I think DreamWise adds to that canon because, again, it's very explicit. It does offer kind of a basic grounding in theory, but it takes it beyond that to help you really apply it. And one of the ways that we've done that is through the addition of what we've called the keys. So throughout DreamWise, there are 69 keys, and they're really little prompts that help you apply the theory to your dream. So you can go to DreamWise and look at the keys and just ask yourself the question, does this apply to my dream? And you can try it on. It doesn't always work. There's 69 of them. Not all of them are going to apply to every dream. But usually if you try a handful of them, you'll find that, or at least I find, that the meaning begins to open. The thing is that our dreams come from the unconscious, and they come from the unconscious to tell us something that we, our conscious personality, doesn't yet fully understand. So the dream always carries with it new information that we either don't know or sometimes we don't want to know. We're defended against it in some sense. And that explains why it's so difficult to understand our own dreams. It's really like asking us to turn our head around and see our back. It's the thing, the dream carries the message that is very alien to ego consciousness. But it's important because it's a different perspective. It may not be that the dream brings the absolute correct perspective, but it certainly brings a different perspective, and that can be so valuable, especially if we're feeling stuck. There's another quote in here from Jung that I really like, that I'd like to share, if that's okay.
Please, absolutely.
He says, in each of us there is another whom we do not know. He speaks to us in dreams and tells us how differently he sees us from how we see ourselves. And this is so important. There's another in us who has a totally different perspective and who can help us get unstuck. Ego consciousness can be very one-sided. So we can get stuck. We feel like our life doesn't have any energy, like we're not sure what we're doing, like we're not sure what the juice is. We don't know how to move forward in our personal or professional lives. If we could think our way out of it, we already would have. And that's where dreams come in, because they bring in this new perspective from this other within. And that's the value of working with dreams. But it is also what can make it difficult, because we're straining to hear something that is pretty different from what we're already thinking.
My guest is Lisa Marchiano. Her book is called Dreamwise, Unlocking the Meaning of Your Dreams. Lisa, please share with our listeners where they can get the books and also find out more about your podcast and your work.
Sure. Well, our podcast is thisjungianlife.com, and that's Jungian, thisjungianlife.com. You can find out about our podcast and lots of our programs there. And my author website is lisamarchiano.com. You can find out about all of my books there, including Dreamwise. And you can also find out more about my women's fairy tale group, spinningstraw.com.
And we'll be back with more of Lisa after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going Om. My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad, your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute?
When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can, making sure they're safe and comfortable. But it's just as important that you take some time for yourself. At AARP, we can help with information and useful tips on how you can maintain a healthy life balance, care for your own physical and mental well-being, and manage the challenges of caring for a loved one. Because the better care you take of yourself, the better care you can provide for your loved one.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Lisa Marchiano, her book, Dreamwise, Unlocking the Meaning of Your Dreams. Lisa, what are some of the benefits of learning to work with our dreams?
Well, dreams are beautiful and they're mysterious. And so even just from that standpoint, it's a wonderful thing to welcome them into our lives. You know, most of us go through our days and we have a list of things to do, and we have to be so concrete and on task. And yet here's this moment of mystery when we wake up in the morning and we contemplate these very strange images that we could never have come up with our conscious mind. So they're beautiful. That's the first thing. The other thing is that dreams introduce us to the inner companion. So a minute ago, I was sharing Jung's quote about how there is another within who speaks to us in dreams. And this is remarkable, and it's true. And when you work with dreams, you begin to develop a relationship with that other within, that inner companion. And you really do learn that you're not alone, that there is another perspective inside of you who cares about you, who wants the best for you, who is always watching out for you and giving you a nudge. Do a little bit more of this, do a little bit less of that, and helping you grow towards wholeness.
I've been having vivid dreams, lucid dreams, for many, many years. And I had one a few months ago that when I awoke, I was in tears from. May I share it with you?
Oh, I'd love that.
My dream is that I was enrolled in an angel academy. And there was this huge temple, and we walked inside, and it was shaped in a U, 18 tables shaped in a U. And we were instructed to go from table to table, make eye contact with the angelic being at each of these tables, and when they nodded their head, move on to the next. And we made this complete circuit of the 18 tables. And then we were instructed to go back to the main table and make eye contact with the main angel there. And at that point, we were given two things. We were given our angelic name and our angelic assignment. The name that I was given was Aviel, which translated from Hebrew means God is my Father. And my assignment was to be an angel to other angels. Now, I know what this was about, but I would welcome your feedback.
Well, I mean, that is truly a remarkable dream. That's what we might call a big dream. And, dreams always relate to what's going on in our lives. And of course, I don't know anything about your life, so I don't have any associations or any context, but I will just say that this seems to be a momentous dream of great import. In some sense, it's introducing you to your destiny, which my guess is that you already know something about your destiny, but perhaps this was confirming it. It's interesting that it's almost a sort of an image of kind of angel speed dating. But I love this image of making eye contact. And I wonder if you could tell me, did you have that experience of making eye contact with each angel?
Yes.
That must have been very, very profound and full of numinosity and awe.
Absolutely.
So it was a real confrontation, I would say, with what Jung called the self, the guiding center of the personality. And it is the self that keeps our destiny and introduces us to it, sometimes through dreams. Sometimes that's where we learn the nature of our purpose here. And that was indeed given to you in a very explicit way. And I would wonder too, since it was angels, it does make me wonder if the dream was hinting at, an issue around mortality, if it was providing insight or comfort perhaps around that issue.
What this meant to me is I'm an ordained interfaith minister, among other things. And for many, many years, I've been assisting and providing guidance and compassion to my sisters and brothers who are interfaith ministers and others that have come across my path. And I recognize that this was basically confirming that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do in this lifetime.
Yeah. So you must have woken up deeply grateful and also with a real sense of clarity.
Absolutely. And that's why I was in tears, because it was a revelation to me of something that I knew already, but it sort of confirmed everything that I had experienced. Well,
you knew it at a different level.
Right.
You knew it at a different level, and it was, it sounds so profound. Yeah.
I know from my personal experience that if I have a dream that I want to remember, I keep a notepad next to my bed and journal the dream as soon as I wake up, which included this one. What would you offer to someone who says they can't remember their dreams?
Yeah, that's a question that we get asked a lot. And we actually have a whole appendix in the book about how to remember your dreams. So there are many, many tips that we offer. The main one is the one that you just shared. Get yourself a notebook, get yourself a pen. Do it with intention, I think. So I chose a special notebook for myself and a special pen. My pen has a little red light on it at the tip so that I can write even in the dark. But, whatever sort of speaks to you, and then write down whatever you can when you wake up in the morning. Even if it's just a little fragment, the more that you engage with your dreams, the more you write them down, the more that you are likely to remember them. There are other techniques. For example, you can visualize yourself recalling your dreams in the morning. You can tell yourself you're going to recall your dreams. You can try taking some supplements. So vitamin B6, I believe, is the supplement that can help you remember your dreams. And there's more information about that in the book.
Are all dreams meaningful?
Well, I think so. I think all dreams are meaningful. I know that not everyone agrees with me, but I think all dreams come to us in the interest of healing and wholeness.
I'm going to share one from someone else that allowed me to share this. I'm not going to mention the person's name. But this person had a dream that they were climbing a staircase, and the staircase would go to the next level, and they kept climbing the staircase, and it went on forever and ever and ever, continually climbing with no resolution of exit. What would you say about that?
Well, the first thing is I would be really curious about the feelings in the dream, and also the feeling upon awakening. And one of the things about DreamWise that I'm very proud of is we have an entire chapter on emotions in dreams and what they mean and how to work with them. Emotions are such an important part of a dream. And as far as I know, no one has ever written extensively on it. So that is a really special thing about our book. Do you happen to know how this dream was experienced?
It was experienced with frustration.
Yeah. So, the two possibilities would have been frustration, and the other possibility would be just a sense of a kind of calm acceptance of moving forward. And again, not knowing anything about the person or his or her psychology or the circumstances of this person's life, I would say that, climbing stairs with no end in sight, it's a little bit like a task from a Greek myth, where there's no sense of resolution. And the fact that the person felt frustrated tells me that that's kind of a dominant part of the image. On the one hand, it is an image of ascension. The person is going up. And that, of course, could be kind of taken positively. But the fact that it's a negative feeling tells me, maybe not so much. One thing about climbing in dreams, for example, is that although it's certainly good to be rising, also sometimes climbing means we're getting away from our psychic basement. We might be getting too far up in our head, and that might be part of the reason why the person was just climbing and climbing with no end in sight, because, our thinking function, our kind of cognitive abilities, that sort of wonderful neocortex that we evolved is really terrific. We wouldn't be human without it. But we can sometimes get so lost in our psychic attic, in our head upstairs, that we really lose contact with the instincts. And that can create a feeling of emptiness and lifelessness.
And if I share with you that this person had a great frustration and dissatisfaction in their career, would that help? Would that help?
Yeah, sure. Yes. That my comments were general, but certainly, perhaps the person was striving endlessly and, couldn't seem to get where they wanted to go. Now, I will say this, that dreams usually tell us something that we don't already know. Or as with your dream, like you said, you knew it, but you kind of understood it in a different way after you had the dream. So if the person woke up from this dream and said, that's about my frustrations at work, I'd say, well, I think the dream probably was trying, yes, maybe, but I think the dream was probably trying to give you a slightly different perspective on it. And And then it might be interesting to know what is going on at work. What were the particulars of the staircase? Were there any details? And does it resonate that perhaps you've been approaching work with kind of too much of a either like a task orientation, like a sort of drudgery, like, oh, I've just got to climb another flight of stairs, or even what I alluded to before, that there's a lot of thinking going on. And where are your instincts?
Absolutely. How do you address nightmares or bad dreams? Should they be paid attention to or ignored?
Well, I think that a nightmare is really just any dream that's fearful, and we do talk a little bit about nightmares. I think nightmares are kind of the psyche's way of really trying to get our attention. It's like, the Dreammaker senses dreams when we're off course. And if we're a little off course, we might have a kind of small dream. But if we're a lot off course, the Dreammaker is going to be kind of shouting at us. And that is a nightmare. And by the way, the Dreammaker does sometimes send us dreams to sort of confirm something. And your dream is a good example of that. But those are a little unusual. Usually the Dreammaker showing up to tell us something that we need to pay attention to. And nightmares are really a strong statement of that. So I think it's especially important to pay attention to nightmares, and it's no wonder that we tend to remember them. They usually really make an impression on us. So the nightmare doesn't come to encourage you to be afraid of something. It wants you to wake up and pay attention.
What is what Jung referred to as animus anima, and how does it arise in our dream worlds?
Mm-hmm. Well, the animus or anima is an archetype that Jung postulated was part of our psyche. So Jung said that every man has an inner aspect of himself that is feminine, and he gave it the Latin word anima, which means soul. And he said that every woman has a masculine part of her, and he called that the animus. So technically, in Jungian formulation, men have an anima and women have an animus. And it may show up in your dreams as an opposite sex figure. Now, anything that I say about dreams, by the way, there are no absolutes. It's not that this is always what it looks like. It's not that every opposite sex figure is going to be an anima or an animus. There are no hard and fast rules in dream interpretation. We try to give you in Dreamwise just a place to start. And so if you have an opposite sex figure in a dream, you might start by wondering if it's an image of anima or animus. And what this can mean is that the anima or animus shows up to show you your unrealized potential. So it would be a part of you, but it would feel pretty alien, often in a very entrancing, inviting way. So you might have a dream about a lover, for example. Sometimes the anima or animus can show up in its negative form, and that can be quite frightening. But that has a purpose too.
And what are some of the other archetypes that manifest in our dreams?
Well, you might find the shadow, and you also might find images of the self, the guiding center of the personality. And Jung capitalized the S when he used the word self. And in a sense, all dreams come from the self. But sometimes we have dreams that are incredibly numinous, where it's almost as if the self makes an appearance. And I think that your dream does that. With that kind of that central angel, or even the 18 other angels who are maybe aspects of that guiding center of the personality.
What is the practice of active imagination?
Active imagination was Jung's technique for dreaming the dream onward. It was essentially a direct encounter with the unconscious that's initiated by consciousness. We have a whole chapter on active imagination in the book. Active imagination is a helpful technique on its own, but it can be especially useful when working with a dream. If you have a dream that has a perplexing image that you don't understand, let's say that, I don't know, a strange animal shows up in your dream, and you've worked with it, you don't know what to make of it, you could try active imagination. So close your eyes, turn off your phone, get about a half an hour when you're not going to be bothered, and then let yourself kind of enter a light hypnagogic state. So take a few deep breaths, go inward, check in with your body, and then see if you can kind of call up the image of this strange animal and sit with it and just wait patiently until it begins to move or speak. And it invariably will. And then you can engage it. You can ask it questions and see what it answers. And when you're done, you should always journal about it so that you capture it. Sometimes it really opens up the experience of the dream and kind of makes clear what's happening. Sometimes it's just some more adjunctive material that gives you more to speculate about as you're working with the dream. And sometimes it's just a deep feeling experience that kind of extends extends the experience of the dream.
My guest is Lisa Marchiano. Her book, Dreamwise, Unlocking the Meaning of Your Dreams. We'll be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for inspired conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
This is Kathy Beal, host of Celestial Compass, featuring astrology you can use. Celestial Compass points you to what's going on in the sky and what you can do with it down here on Earth. We also explore fun, effective, and cosmic tools for navigating this adventure we call life. Join me the first and third Monday of the month at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for Celestial Compass. It's enlightening, entertaining, and empowering.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
We asked parents who adopted teens to share their journey.
Nathan has taught me to embrace the moment. Age-wise, I'm in my late 60s. I'm old enough to be his grandfather. Will he be embarrassed to acknowledge me as his dad? I think the most important thing we can do is let them know that they're safe, that they're valued and cared for and loved, and that they're important.
I knew I wanted to be adopted by him because of how he taught me to be the person who I am today. And it's coming from a dad that didn't expect to become a dad. And I feel very proud to be his son.
I was what he needed, and he was what I needed. Every day is full of new opportunities. That's what it's been about, realizing the simple things that it takes to make such a huge difference in these kids' lives.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care at adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Lisa Marchiano, her book, Dreamwise, Unlocking the Meaning of Your Dreams. Lisa, what is the practice of active imagination, Jung's signature technique for psychological healing and growth?
So in active imagination, we really want to meet the unconscious where it is, but we start from our conscious standpoint. And instead of it coming to us at night in our dreams, we kind of go to it. So we invite it in, we find an image, perhaps it's an image from a dream. So that's why we included a chapter on active imagination in Dreamwise, because it can be helpful in working with dreams. And you let the image begin to move on its own and speak to you.
Now, you touched upon this in our last segment. How does dreamwork assist us on the path of becoming whole, what Jung called individuation?
Jung's major idea was that over the course of a lifetime, we are growing into the person we were meant to be, and he called this individuation. Jung was one of the only theorists that was really interested in development beyond childhood. So, Freud and a lot of other early psychoanalysts focused on what happened in childhood and kind of said that sets the stage for everything that comes after. Erik Erikson and Jung were kind of standouts, and then they said, well, wait a minute, what about all the growth and development that happens later in life as well? Jung said that we spend the first half of life, roughly, developing an ego, getting out in the world, establishing a career, finding a relationship, maybe having a family, but that at some point we begin to kind of turn inward and we get curious about other things that maybe got pushed aside while we were doing this. And this is often called the second half of life and can be characterized by kind of a midlife crisis. But this process of turning inward is an important part of individuation. It's an important part of picking up those aspects of ourselves that we may have left, unacknowledged, undeveloped, just kind of glowing coals on the storeroom floor. Jung refers to them at some point. They never really took fire, but they've still got some glow in them. And if we can find them and pick them up and maybe blow on them, they'll get new life. And then we'll be enlivened by that content. So the aim of individuation is not perfection, it's wholeness. It's finding those parts of ourselves that we haven't yet paid attention to. And I would say that every dream at its essence is nudging us continually toward individuation. It's reminding us of the aspects of ourselves that we've forgotten or have never paid attention to. It's letting us know where we're out of balance. It's bringing into consciousness that which has been spurned or set aside.
Why is it that some people find dreams nonsensical and difficult to understand?
I think most of us find them difficult and nonsensical. I certainly do, as I said before, especially when working with my own dreams. And I think this is because the Dreammaker, the other within, the inner companion, doesn't have access to directed thought and kind of straightforward language the way our conscious mind does. So it has to speak in the language of image and metaphor and symbol. Freud felt that dreams were a disguise, but Jung said no, the dream is not a disguise. The dream is not trying to trick you. The dream is the best possible expression of something that's known in the psyche at that time. But it just may be a bit of a puzzle, and that's why we have to learn the language of dream interpretation.
What would you share with those who don't pay attention to their dreams?
Well, it's certainly not my role to tell anyone what they should or shouldn't do. And if dreams are just not interesting to you, then there you go. But if you have any curiosity about your dreams, if you've ever awakened from a dream and felt moved, if you've ever been tickled by one of these images that occurs to you as you're sleeping, then I think that it is well worth your effort to explore it a little bit further.
Ancient cultures felt that dreams could help predict the future. Can dreams let us know what's going to happen?
Some dreams are indeed precognitive. There are some remarkable examples of precognitive dreams that have been documented. And of course, most of us have had, or many of us, I should say, have had an experience or two that certainly felt really uncanny, where perhaps a dream alerted us to something that was going to happen in a strange way. But most of the time, dreams point us toward the future in a rather more ordinary way. It is certainly true that dreams can let us know what might be coming. But usually this is not a kind of psi capability that's finding expression through our dreams, but rather just an artifact of the reality that the unconscious is constantly collecting all kinds of information that consciously, it's too much. We couldn't possibly pay attention to it all, but it goes into the unconscious is incredibly good at reading patterns. There's all of this information for it to take account of, and then it can kind of spit out basically kind of a prediction based on patterns. And Jung actually likened it to a weather forecast. So the meteorologist takes a look at what's going on, says, hey, there's a high pressure system over here and a low pressure system over there, and that means there might be rain next week. And in some sense, that's what our dreams are doing. So dreams can often provide a warning. There's a dream in the book where someone who was kind of beginning to contemplate having an affair dreamt that she was driving a car. At night, she started driving across a long, winding bridge, and there was absolutely no light. So in the dream, it became apparent to her that she was running a real risk of driving off the bridge. And that was a real warning that she needed to stop. She needed to just kind of be where she was and not make any movement for the time being. And that's what she did.
Do you have another example of a precognitive dream?
Well, again, I wouldn't say that one was precognitive. Precognitive, I can tell you a little bit about an example of a precognitive dream. These are these eerie dreams that are difficult to explain, that really seem to kind of come from the realm of magic, if you will. And so one of those was documented in 1966 in Aberfan in South Wales. There was a slide of coal waste that inundated this small mining town, and it covered the school, and it killed more than 100 children. So the psychiatrist John Barker arrived in Aberfan later that same day and was told this story of a 10-year-old girl named Errol Mae Jones. And she had a dream before the tragedy. So she woke up and she said, I went to school, and this was her dream. I went to school and there was no school there. Something black had come down all over it. Mm-hmm. And little Errol Mae told her mother that dream in the morning, and then she went to school and was killed and died in the accident.
Oh my goodness.
So that's a rather remarkable example. And Jung himself had a dream of meeting a gigantic wolfhound in his dream, and knew that the wild huntsman had commanded it to carry away a human soul. And in the morning he awoke and found out that his mother had passed away. So these things certainly do happen, but a lot of times our dreams just kind of come to warn us. There's another dream in the book, similar circumstance. A woman was getting very involved emotionally with another person outside of her marriage, and nothing had happened yet, but there was a lot of intensity to it. And she had this dream that she'd bought a new house, But when she moved into the house was falling apart and kind of went from bad to worse. And that dream really kind of woke her up. She woke up in the morning and she thought, I think I need to think about this more. I think I need to think about what I'm doing.
Absolutely. What would you like your readers to take away from DreamWise?
I would like for readers to be inspired by their dreams. I would like for them to be in love with the process of dream work and to know that they have a tool that they can carry forward in life. I love our keys because they're portable, they're usable. You can pull them out, and when you have a dream and you're stuck on it, you can use the keys to help understand it. And I want people to know that dream work is doable and that they can have that relationship with the inner other, the inner companion, the Dreammaker.
My guest, Lisa Marchiano, her book, DreamWise, Unlocking the Meaning of Your Dreams. Lisa, one more time, please share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you and all your work.
Sure. Well, you can find out more about DreamWise and about my podcast, This Jungian Life, by going to thisjungianlife.com, and that is spelled Jungian, This Jungian Life. My author website is lisamarchiano.com, and you can find out about all of my books there, including DreamWise, The Vital Spark, and Motherhood. And you can also find out about my online women's fairy tale group called Spinning Straw.
Lisa, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this fascinating information about our dreams.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.